I've lived everywhere, man. In Texas, anyway. From Waco to Lubbock, Corpus to El Paso, Dallas to San Antonio, with Houston in between. From the defenders of the Alamo centuries ago to Medal of Honor winners of today. We don't ever want to forget the contributions our Mexican-American forefathers have made to enrich the lives of all Texans. We also want to recognize today's rising stars that are paving the way for Texas' next 200 years. May God bless Texas. This is TXMX TV. And welcome to another episode of TXMX TV. My name is Orlando Salazar, your host. And today is really a special day for me because the guest that we're going to have today is somebody that I've known for quite a while. He's a great guy with a great story and a wonderful family and a real leader here in Texas in so many ways, especially in the food business and the Mexican food side of the food industry here in Texas. One of the long lineage type of restaurants in our state. And so we'd like to welcome Victor Leal from the Panhandle. I'm not sure where you are, Victor. I don't know if you're in Amarillo or Muleshoe or where you might be, but wherever you are, welcome to TXMX TV.
Orlando, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here with you today. I wish we were together in person, but being what it is, COVID and all these kind of things, I guess we'll have to settle for meeting long distance. I am in Muleshoe today, my hometown, the town I grew up in. I'm actually in my mom's living room right now. Right behind me to this side is the door to her kitchen where we have enjoyed thousands and thousands of great meals. So yeah, it's good to be here with you.
Well, what a cool place to be in your home with your mom there close by. That is really tremendous. And really, that's the story of Leal's, right? It's family. It's a family business that has grown from a very small place in South Texas to where you are today. And the longevity you've had in the Panhandle. Everybody knows Leal's. So let's just start at the beginning. I know that it started in the valley in Mercedes, Texas. Walk us through those early years.
Oh man, so my mom and dad were born and raised in the Rio Grande Valley in the town of Mercedes, and my mom was actually raised on Texas Street. My grandfather, who I'm named after, his name is Elias Victor Anzaldúa, migrated from Mexico, Reynosa, Mexico, to the United States, to Texas, back in the early 1900s. By the 1920s, that's him. He sold tortillas, fresh corn tortillas, out of that Model T. He would make tortillas fresh. He'd fire up his molino about 3 o'clock in the morning so that he'd have the tortillas fresh and ready to go for his neighbors there on Texas Street, and he would deliver a nickel here, a dime there. But it was during the time of the Depression, so the stories that I hear about my granddad, I should say, were that he was this amazing saint. He gave most of the tortillas away. He was very benevolent, knowing that people had needs. So one of the recipients of his largesse, his goodness, was on my dad's side. And on my dad's side is a different story. On the Leal side of the family, Justino Leal, my grandfather, unfortunately suffered from with alcoholism and had a hard time keeping a job or making any money. So my dad's side of the family, 8 kids, they grew up in abject poverty, very, very poor. But my abuelito, Anzaldúa, would go to my grandmother's house, made sure they had something to eat, and he would fix her Singer sewing machine because that's what she used to make a living. We still have her machine, matter of fact. But beautiful story of how my mom grew up in the tortilla business. My father grew up, his uncles, the Saldañas in the Rio Grande Valley, taught him to make menudo and barbacoa. So dad became a migrant worker, and what that means is he would, back during the 40s, early 40s, 1940s, he would leave home during the summertime, and he would essentially just follow the crops. He would go to Jacksonville to pick tomatoes in East Texas, and he'd come up here to the Panhandle, to the South Plains, and he'd pick cotton. And he fell in love with this area up here. So in 1954, he moved here, and he was working with a place called the Association. It was a Bracero Association, and the one of the things that the American government did and did very well is
tell us what
Go
a
ahead.
bracero. Tell us what bracero means for people that wouldn't know that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Bracero, brazos are arms, of course, you know, brazos. Bracero program started back. It was a component of a need that took place because the men were off to war. Of course, you're in the middle of the Second World War, and most young men are fighting overseas. And so the crops were literally rotting in the fields or weren't being planted. So the Mexican government, along with the American government, made a pact, and they brought guest workers over from Mexico. They had to be men. They could stay 6 months to a year. And my dad became a liaison in Muleshoe at the association, where you would have the farmers and the braceros. As the farmers say, Choy or Jesse, I need 6 men. We're going to work for 3 weeks or a month or two. And he would make sure that the braceros were there and got them together. And typically the braceros lived out on the farm in barracks, you know, with the farmers. And so that's you know, that was Dad's first job here in Muleshoe as he began to settle here. Married my mom in '55, Thanksgiving Day, and they came to Muleshoe immediately. So,
Well, so that's how you ended up in the Panhandle,
right.
and so he worked in that bracero program. How did things evolve into the restaurant business?
Great question. So going back to the bracero program, part of the deal was that the farmers had to bring the braceros into town 1 day a week. Remember, the braceros are typically out, you know, on the farm 15 or 20 miles outside of town, housed in barracks. And so, you know, to do their shopping, to buy their goods and everything, they had to sign a contract, the farmers did, that said, we're going to bring them into town and they can do their shopping. So typically, back in that day, back in the late 50s, early 60s, Muleshoe actually had a bowling alley, had 2 movie theaters, and you know, things. And Main Street was really hopping. You know, their dry goods stores, you know, were really busy. They tell me that even some of the dry goods stores didn't have a chance to unload the Wrangler jeans or, you know, the shirts, because they were being bought up just as soon as, you know, the trucks would back up. So my mom saw this influx of braceros. Remember, she came from Mercedes. A lot of Mexicanos there, tortillas, you know, that's what she grew up making. Well, there's nobody making Orlando tortillas on the South Plains in 1957. I mean, there was nowhere to get a tortilla. There was one little Mexican food restaurant in Lubbock, and then there was one Mexican restaurant in Clovis, New Mexico, called El Monterrey. So Mom saw this need. She saw that there was this void there for Mexican food. So she kept asking my dad, let's open a restaurant. You know, vamos a comenzar, you know, let's start a little tortilla factory. And Dad was reluctant. You know, he was working. My older brother Hector was born already. They were struggling to make ends meet, and they were living in a 1-room apartment, and not a 1-bedroom apartment, but a 1-room apartment. They struggled for a couple of years. Remember, they married in '55. By '57, they had saved up $750. That was their life savings. They had worked hard. And again, the cupboards were pretty bare. And Mom's insistence, let's open a tortilla factory. Let's open up a little cafe. And Dad took the $750. This is the story I grew up with. Dad finally took that money and he laid it on a very bare kitchen table. My older brother Hector's a toddler. He's 2 years old at this time. My mom's pregnant with my sister Alma. And Dad says, here's the choice. We can use this money as a down payment on a home, because we need a home. Our family is growing. And my mom still says, my mom's 88 years old now. She says, when he said, or, her ears kind of perked. She said, or we can take this $750 and buy a tortilla machine. And my mom didn't blink an eye. I mean, she just said, let's buy the tortilla machine. So the interesting story about that is there was a Senor Garcia that made my grandfather's tortilla machine, a single machine where you put the masa in, the tortillas come out after 3 rounds in the oven, they come out on the other end. wonderful, great, fresh tortillas. Mr. Garcia made the machine for my parents, delivered it up here to the Panhandle from the Rio Grande Valley. They set it up, and March 4th of 1957, fresh tortillas came off the tortilla press, and we began feeding mainly the braceros on the weekends, Saturdays and Sundays. Menudo, pollo en salsa, and barbacoa. But let me tell you, Orlando, one of the most interesting things that transpired in that time. Like I said, there were very few. Well, there weren't any Mexican restaurants to speak of. And since my dad, number one, my dad had this wonderful way of hospitality, had a beautiful spirit about him. And everybody that knew him loved him because of the way he was. Very gregarious, very outgoing, but very filled with love. And you could just sense that love. He was the kind of person that you were just better being around him. And so the farmers loved him, and the braceros loved him, and they trusted him because they'd worked with him for a couple of years. But here's the cool thing. The farmers would come because the braceros would go downtown, buy their goods, whatever they needed. And then they would walk. It was about a quarter of a mile from Main Street to my mom and dad's little tin metal building cafe on the east side of town. So they'd walk over there, and the farmers, Sunday night on their way back, they'd go pick them up at the factory. So Dad would see Farmer, sitting out here in the parking lot in his pickup, and he knew him. That's Mr. Williams. So he would go and fix him some taquitos, take him out to the truck, for him and his wife. And here's the cool thing: the next week, Mr. Williams never eaten Mexican food, right? I mean, this wasn't something that they'd ever been introduced to. So Mr. Williams would come back and said, "Hey, Jesse," very shyly knock on that old metal door that we had on that 50-seat tin metal building with no insulation. "Hey, Jesse, can I get some more of those tacos?" And Dad fondly would tell the story, say, "Yeah, Mr. Williams, but don't sit down in your truck. Come on in." So for the first time on the South Plains, you had the braceros and you had the farmers, Anglos and Mexicans, that were sitting side by side, drinking, Cokes and grapes out of these wonderful bottles, fresh hot tortillas, menudo, barbacoa, tacos, pollo en salsa, and that was our start.
Well, that's a tremendous story, Victor. That is really great. So let me ask you a really dumb question. Did you make flour tortillas and corn tortillas, or just corn tortillas?
Just corn tortillas. Corn tortillas and we cook the corn, nixtamal, so we still make corn tortillas. Matter of fact, when Mr. Garcia came, my dad was brilliant. He was brilliant with numbers, and he was entrepreneurial as well. But Mr. Garcia, Dad was very young. He's 25 years old, and he had never seen anybody open a restaurant. They were plowing new ground. They were bushwhacking. They were pioneering. And so when Mr. Garcia came to put in the machine, Dad followed him around. And he said, "Senor Garcia, how much do you think I need, to open this business? How much is it going to take?" And Mr. Garcia told him, Dad always said Mr. Garcia is very respectful. He would always call him Senor Leal. And Dad was, of course, much younger. He said, "I can't tell you," he spoke to him in Spanish, "no te puedo decir, I can't tell you how much it's going to take for you to open your business." He said, "I can tell you my experience. My experience was that I knew a little bit about making machines. I went and found an old motor at the dump yard, at the junkyard. I rewired it. I fixed it. I made the first molino, and I sold it." And Dad was just kind of starry-eyed because you'd always heard, and there's still the myth that you have to have money to make money. Dad always told us that that's not true. So what Mr. Garcia told Dad after Dad badgered him, with questions: what happens here? What happens there? What if this happens? What if there's no business? What if the machine breaks down? And Mr. Garcia finally stood back and he said, "Senor Leal, I can tell you this. I've been around you now for 3 days. I don't know what's going to happen. You're asking some very good questions, but I know this. You're smart enough to figure it out." And he did. But that's a long-winded way to answer your question. We only made corn tortillas. We started making flour tortillas for the restaurants. My brother now makes flour tortillas for several restaurants in a plant here in Muleshoe. Makes several thousand tortillas. What I also want to mention about Mr. Garcia, he told my dad, "The tortilla business está en pañales." It's in its diapers, is what he said. The Mexican food business is in its infancy. It's in diapers. You're going to watch the Mexican food business grow to things you can't even imagine. And I remember Dad going to buy corn one day at the masa mill here in Muleshoe, because there's a masa plant here that ships masa all over the world, and there are stacks and stacks of corn, and they were making this milling this corn and dehydrating it, what we call maseca. And Dad remembered Mr. Garcia's words that it was in its infancy, and Dad was starting to pioneer an industry that was going to grow incredibly. So back then they would make a couple of 100 pounds of corn. We'd cook a couple of 100 pounds of corn a day. And now my brother he'll make probably about 2,500 pounds of corn just today for our chips, for our restaurants, and for grocery stores.
So the restaurant business was in its infancy, and you were in your infancy. Tell us about you growing up, being around that atmosphere in the restaurant business, and what role you played as you got a little older, being around your mom and dad and being in the restaurant.
That's a great question. So I'm the third child. There are 6 kids in our family. I have 3 brothers and 2 sisters. The oldest brother is Hector, who you'll see in a lot of the pictures as they come up on the screen. My older sister, Alma, and then me, and then my younger sister, Laura. And then I have our younger sister, Sergio. Our younger brother, Sergio, and then 2 younger brothers, and then a younger brother, Abel, who's there in Dallas practicing law. But to your question, what role did I play? The siblings played a tremendous role, and Mom and Dad are always quick we're always quick, I should say, to give the kids credit. Sometimes I've thought about this a lot lately. We are really not second generation tortilla restaurant kids. You know how you have the parents start a business and then the kids take it over. Really and truly, I've thought about this a lot, discussed it with my parents and with my siblings. We're kind of the 1.5 generation, because we were in their hands-on helping them get started. I was born in the Rio Grande Valley because my mom would go back to be with her mom in Mercedes when we were born. But I was brought back to Texas, to Muleshoe, at 45 days old. I went straight to the restaurant. I probably literally nursed in our kitchen, at the old tortilla factory, with the tortilla factory there and the, manula and all those kind of things, because we were there. Mom had the kids and she was at work. And so I slept on pallets of corn. Corn sacks. I would use the apron bundles. They came in bundled, and I would use those for a pillow. I remember vividly and very, very fondly traveling south to Morton, stop at Needmore at Eddie Beans, and we'd drop off tortillas. We would load up after our little lunch run. Hector and Alma were in school. I was, 4 or 5 years old, so I was at the restaurant with, I would call it a cafe. And we would load out fresh tortillas, just like my grandfather, and Dad and I would head south or, towards Lubbock or towards Plainview, towards Hereford, depending on what day it was, in a baby blue Rambler station wagon, just he and I, and backloaded with tortillas. And we would stop and take tortillas to different places. So, we grew up, all the kids grew up working. We worked and worked, whether it was bussing tables, making tortillas, we learned it from the cooking to the hospitality to what was important. And Dad had a mantra. He taught us a lot of things. He was way beyond his time. Very, like I say, the astuteness that he had with his business, the way he treated people. But he used to tell us this all the time, Orlando. He would tell us, "Nadie te debe nada." No one owes you a thing. He said, in this life, no one owes you anything. Don't go around with a chip on your shoulder or believing that you're entitled. Everything that comes to you is a gift from God. Every person that comes to you is a gift from God. You work hard, you be grateful for everything and to everyone. He was the most gracious and grateful person that I've ever known in my life, along with being the most generous. But that stuck with us. I think all of us learned that, hey, you're not entitled. You're not a victim. You are somebody you can work hard. You can attain the American dream. All it takes is hard work. And then just like anything else, there'll be setbacks. There'll be challenges. But just like Mr. Garcia told my dad, you're smart enough to figure it out. That's what Dad told us. Nobody owes you anything. Work hard. Go make it happen.
We're quickly running out of time, Victor. I want to fast forward a little bit. I know you went to school. Did you go to Texas Tech?
I did not. I have my siblings, my sister, my younger brother, Abel, went to Texas Tech. So we have a strong affinity there. Have my have several family members who have gone to Texas Tech. I went to Southwest Texas State University for about one semester and decided, you know, I probably need to go back home and work because I wasn't getting anything done there. So I came back about one semester after college, started managing the restaurant at 18 years old.
So you got a degree in real life.
Hard Knocks, the School of Hard Knocks.
That's it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
let's fast forward a little bit more then to you've become a leader in the community there in Muleshoe, and then you feel kind of a shoulder tap, or you feel the Lord leading you to do something bigger than yourself, and you did something there in local government.
Yeah. So Dad always taught us. Quick story about my dad, and then I'll answer your question. I remember a moment that was very profound for me. I was probably about 13 or 14 years old, and my dad was serving on the Parks Board here in Muleshoe. He was always on the hospital board or Parks Board or a housing board. He always felt like there was that we were responsible for serving our communities in a variety of ways, serving our churches, serving our communities. So he always instilled that in us. But I remember Orlando very distinctly watching. My dad wasn't an outdoorsy type guy. He wasn't the kind of guy that go hunting. I think about we were talking about me riding my Harley Davidson or riding my bike. I never saw Dad doing anything real physical. But this particular day, he came in and he was sweating. He had his little double knit pants on. He was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he was washing his hands. And my mom was kind of worried about him because it looked like he's might have a little heat stroke or something. She said, Chewy, are you okay? I said, I've been out. Since a volunteer gave us a lot of, we got like 50 trees. And so I've been at the park planting those small sapling trees. And he said, he looked at my mom and he said, he's kind of pensive. And he said, I'm never going to enjoy the shade from those trees, but hopefully my kids and my grandkids will. So it was just kind of a profound moment to me. And now I take walks at that park almost daily, and those trees are big. And yeah, I enjoy the shade from them. So it takes a man who looks forward and doesn't, look towards himself, I think is a wise man. So to your question, I served on different boards, whether it's Chamber of Commerce in a small town to make it roll. There are a lot of people wear, a lot of different hats. And I was serving on the hospital board and thinking about renewing my term when the city secretary asked me about, asked my wife, actually, Debbie, about me running for mayor. I never thought about, running for elected office, but I had about 20 folks at the restaurant when word got out, and I didn't put it out that I was interested in running for mayor because I never said that. Matter of fact, I said quite the opposite. But Mary Hicks, I think, told some folks that, yeah, he's interested. And so they came to the restaurant and said, you need to do this, because you need to give back to the community, and we feel like you'd be good at this. And so I knew nothing about city government, but I jumped in and I ran. I got 70% of the vote, and I found out after a couple of years, I really enjoyed serving in that capacity. There's so many things that you could do, and I just kind of clicked with it. I love policy. I love figuring out, taking a business approach to government. And then through that, Rick Perry became a good friend, and he appointed me to several different committees and commissions, state boards. And I've just had a great time from that standpoint in government, being able to serve. So the biggest honor I think I've ever had, I don't know if it'll ever be surpassed, is getting elected twice as a mayor of my hometown, because these are the folks that grow up and knew me. I grew up, my teachers, my coaches, and they know everything about me. So that was a big honor for me.
Did you ever get a traffic ticket?
I'll tell you a quick funny story, because I'm telling too many stories. But I walked out. I'm not very good at keeping my permits and stuff. Debbie does all that, because I don't know. I guess maybe I have a little bit of ADD. But one time my tags, I think, had been out maybe 6 months, and I came out of the city council meeting, and there were about 4 policemen standing around my car, and they were all kind of laughing and said, "Hey guys, what's up?" And they said, "Mayor, your sticker's been out a year." And I said, "Well, one of you guys write me a ticket, I'll pay it." And they all kind of kicked the ground and looked at each other and said, "Write me a ticket." And none of them would. I said, "Well, I'm not going to beg you to. I can't write a ticket for myself." So I hopped in the car, and they kind of parted ways and split up and left him. But no, I did get a lot of calls from friends that I got a speeding ticket. Can you help me? I said, "No, I can't help you. And if you were my friend, you wouldn't ask me for that." So It's kind of funny.
I thought you were going to say you got in your car and drove off, and then they came after you.
They didn't. They let me go. So, so they were very nice to me that particular day.
Well, tell us about your mom. I know that she's still alive.
Yes.
Tell us about your current family, and then tell us about the future of the restaurants and your other businesses, because we don't have much time left. But tell us about those few
Sure.
things.
Thank you, Orlando, for those questions, bringing my family into it. So my mom's 88 years old, sharp as a tack. We're staying here with her right now in the midst of COVID. We've had to close down temporarily our Amarillo restaurant, so we're looking at the future of that. Mule Shoe Restaurant's still running very well. Matter of fact, our numbers are up pre-COVID, so that's a tremendous blessing. It's good to be home for a while. It's good to share a lot of stories with Mom, to take care of her. Actually, that's probably not really true. It's somewhat misleading, probably grossly misleading, because she's really taking care of us, cooking really great meals and things like that. But she's sharp as a tack. I lost my dad. November 6th will be 11 years ago. He was my hero, as you can already tell by the stories that I've told about him. My wife, Debbie, is here with me. She's always been we've always had a strong partnership, in life and in business. She's, as you well imagine, the brains of the business, and does an amazing job. I have two sons, Roman and Noah. Roman is married to my beautiful daughter-in-law, Amy. Roman is in his second year at Yale Law School, and Noah is in Berlin. He just got a really cool job with SoundCloud. Very proud of them. And that's I have a brother that lives here, Father Sergio Leal. He's a priest in the Episcopal Church. My siblings are all around here, so we get together quite a bit. Our family is very close knit, and for the future, I know I'm looking at maybe a fast casual as we kind of take a breather here and get through the challenges of COVID. I'm looking at maybe starting a fast casual restaurant, and seeing how we can leave a legacy for the next generation of Leal's next generation of Texans.
How about expanding? And there's a look at some of your current product right now.
Yeah.
How about expanding into other cities? I know that you've kind of looked at some other places, especially before COVID. Is
Sure.
there a possibility that you would go beyond the Panhandle with your wonderful food?
Absolutely. I think it's a great question as well. And I think that as we reflect and look back on it, I think the restaurant industry is changing. I think that there's a real push towards drive-through, something that's more convenient. Also having something along the lines of a faster casual. So what I'm looking at is taking our recipes and standardizing them, maybe through some sort of a commissary, and having a little smaller footprint. Instead of having an 8,000 square foot restaurant, perhaps we'd have a 4,000 square foot restaurant. I think it's what I want to hang on to is bring back the old, make sure that we're making the tortillas, corn and flour on site, and just doing everything like we've done in the past. Fresh food, great hospitality. Mom always told us this: if you serve people at the restaurants like you would serve them in your home, then you'll be fine. And so, if you come into my home, I'm going to make sure I greet you at the door, offer you the very best that I can, offer you hospitality. And that's what we try to do at the restaurants. We try to honor God with the work that we do. That's the main thing, is we want, C.S. Lewis said, we talk a lot about good works. We don't talk enough about good work. And what he meant by that is we honor our Lord when we do good work. In other words, if we're good craftsmen, whatever you're doing, if you're a painter, if you're a singer, if you make tortillas, make them good. Honor our Lord with the work of our hands. So that's what we want to continue to do.
Well, that's a great way to end the show. Victor, thank you so much for you representing your whole family, your grandparents, your parents, your wife and your children, and your mom. You guys being such a wonderful representative of our people, our Tex-Mex people there in the Panhandle. We're grateful for you, for the leadership that you've given to that part of our state. And I really hope that you expand to Dallas, where I live, and you open a restaurant here. I think that would be terrific if you're able to do that. Now, can our folks find you on a website, as far as can they order your chips and salsa and stuff like that?
Absolutely. So you can go to Leal's Mexican Foods, FOODS.com, lealsmexicanfoods.com, and you can find our chips and our salsa there. You can also go to United Grocery Stores. We're expanding into some Walmarts, hoping to get into other venues that are close by, affiliated stores. So we're selling our chips, queso, hot sauce in Oklahoma, in Colorado, in New Mexico. We get correspondence from folks in a pretty widespread area. So at least 5 or 6 states are selling our products right now, and they're really excellent. But we're continuing to trying to expand those lines.
Well, I don't doubt that one bit, bro. You're always looking to do the best. So thank you for joining us today, Victor. God bless you. And if anybody out there has any ideas for our show in the future, if you'd like to send in some ideas, we have a website there or an email address. You can send your ideas for guests to come on the show, ideas that you might have about really interesting people, our Mexican-American folks here in Texas. Please send us an email at info@texmextv.com. And to end the show, we always end it with a Vaya con Dios segment. And Victor talked a lot about family, how important family is, and the tradition of family for his business, and what a wonderful blessing it's been for him to share in the success of his business and be a part of a wonderful family. Well, God has a family too, and we hear a lot these days about we're all God's children. And of course, to be in a family, you have to be a child at some point. Well, there's a little bit of a misnomer about being God's child. God's word says, but to all who received him and to all who believed in his name, he gave the right to become a child of God, not born of blood or of someone's will or desire, but born of God. So in order to really be one of God's children, you have to be born of God. You have to believe in him. And then later on in Romans, that was in John chapter 1, and in Romans it says, for if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if you live by the Spirit, you put to death the deeds of the body. For all who are led by the Spirit of God are sons of God. So God wants us to live for him by his Spirit, through his Son, and in that way, we become one of his children. So I would ask all of you to be open to receiving God's Son into your life and really, truly become one of his children. Thanks for joining us on TXMX TV, and we'll see you next time. God bless you.